There are two agenda items. If I were to root them into the record, the first one, which is 5.1, is the chairperson of the Electricity Subcommittee report. And the subject is ESCOM's fifth multi-year price determination, MYPD5, revenue application for the 2022-23 financial year. And then the other item is from the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee Chairperson. 6.1 is titled Transnet Tariff Application for the Petroleum Pipeline System for the 2022-2023 financial year. And then, of course, there's closure. Ladies and gentlemen, if you then agree on adopting this agenda, let's do so. Otherwise, if perhaps, let's say, we first give an opportunity for a comment. If there's any amendment to the agenda, considering that the meeting is continuing tomorrow with all other matters. Thank you very much. Can we then show by hand, colleagues, that we adopt the agenda as read?
So it's important for us to go back.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All members have supported. It's unanimous. The agenda is now verbally. Otherwise, you can fill in the form and send it to the secretary before the end of business today. By the way, we've been asked that we should be religious about submitting these forms, given the fact that it also constitutes an audit matter. It's a pure necessary administrative matter. Thank you very much. If there are no declaration, then we move to item 5, Electricity Subcommittee Chairperson. Shall I then hand over to you, Mr. Gumete, to lead the discussion on this matter? But before you do that, let me just make members aware that I was consulted yesterday. There is an additional document that has been circulated. I've allowed it. So I suppose that the presentation will also include that. Mr. Gumete, let me then hand over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to you, members, management, and also the members of the public that have joined us. Chairperson, I'm here to present a request by the Electricity Subcommittee, a request to the Energy Regulator to approve the ESCOM MYPD5 Year 1 revenue application in accordance with the court judgment. A quick summary, Chairperson, on it, and I'll consider that the submission has been read, but just to highlight a few items, is that, as you'd recall, Chair, that the ESCOM had submitted its MYPD5 application in accordance with MYPD4 methodology on the 2nd of June, 2021. In which application ESCOM was requesting amounts of 279 to 279 billion, 335 billion, and 365 billion for the years 2022-23, 23-24, and 24-25 financial years, respectively. NESA, at its meeting of the 30th of September 2020, considered and approved a recommendation by the Electricity Subcommittee to reject ESCOM's MYPD5 application and to request ESCOM to reapply for an interim tariff in terms of one of the 4 options that were put forward to it, but with a particular preference for one that was predicated on the MYPD5 principles. This decision of the ER was challenged successfully by Eskom in court on the basis that the prevailing methodology from 2016 should be used. And the matter was actually heard by the Pretoria High Court before Judge Kolapen, and judgment was handed down on the 3rd of December 2023, and it is annexed here 2 as Annex Chap B. The decision, just to remind members that the decision, in fact, then said Eskom revenue application for 22-23 for financial year 22-23 submitted on the 2nd of June shall be published on the 8th of December. And then the public shall have until the 14th of January to make representations. And public hearings will then be held between the 17th and the 21st of January 2022. And then NASA would actually have to make its final decision by the 24th of February, which is today. In compliance with the ruling of the court, NASA developed a consultation paper to request stakeholders to comment on the application and its impact on the economy. There were, after the consultation was done, ELS members met, and the ELS committee raised a number of issues which are tabled in that table 1. Chairperson, I won't go through all of the issues, but I'm just going to raise a couple of issues that were central to some of the issues raised by the ELS. In essence, a large portion of the comments were focused on the treatment of the regulatory asset base, how that was treated, as in terms of how Eskom, based on how Eskom had considered and made its application. And there were a number of questions raised, including the applicability of the adjustments on the RAB in terms of the adjustments that were made as far back as 2019 and other previous RAB applications. That has been dealt with in the RFD in detail. There were issues raised about maintenance. Again, that is dealt with in the RFD. But just to indicate that maintenance costs are 3.4%, or are increasing at the rate of 3.4%, which is still below inflation. There was a concern, there was an issue raised, Chair, around fraud and corruption, which, as we all know, with the reports that are coming from the Zondo Commission, that the next report will focus, one of the focal areas will be Eskom, the malfeasance that may have happened in Eskom, and the question in terms of how the issues that may emanate or have emanated from any of the findings, either of cases instituted by Eskom itself or by any other institute of government, how that has been dealt with. That again, it's been dealt with in the RFD, and in the main, as it is indicated, that is primarily going to be dealt with via RCAs rather than via this multi-year price determination. Chair, there is maybe just to raise one other issue, other than or maybe two other issues. The issue of the use of open cycle gas turbines. Clearly, that was raised extensively there, especially because during public hearing, the Eskom had indicated a change in terms of their expected use in terms of production, and applied for an increase, I think, from a number of initially 1% to close to 6.5% load factor. That is again dealt with in detail in the RFD, and to indicate also the proposal by management. The other issues, Chairperson, maybe just to broader issues to indicate that during the public hearings, and this was a matter also raised by members, is that it became clear that there are other issues, there are other matters that pass-through costs that are actually not within NERSA as purview, and those were discussed, and some scenarios were actually developed thereon. Those would include issues around arrear debt and carbon tax, and of course maybe the last issue, really the last issue now, Chair, is the issue of dealing with some of the previous court judgments, those and regulatory clearing accounts, which those are actually fall squarely in the purview of NERSA, and that has been dealt with to some extent, and again the detail is in the RFD. So, Chairperson, we are actually the committee, the electricity subcommittee is here requesting the energy regulator to then approve Eskom's MYPD 5 revenue application for the financial year 22-23, which was done in accordance with the High Court judgment. This, Chairperson, in detail is captured in this particular submission in tables 1 and 2 of the decision. But it to be just to indicate that this has now been updated following some further refinements and consultations with the respective parties. These have been adapted, updated, and the updated tables are now given in the addendum, which is attached hereon, as Chair has indicated. Further, we are here to request the ER to note the impact of the revenue application on tariffs, which in this particular submission, it's been reflected in tables 3 and 4. That is considering what would be the likely impact on the tariffs when the legacy decisions are added. Legacy decisions including court orders when they are added with no further adjustments made. And fourthly, to also note the impact of the total revenue application on tariffs after consultation with other stakeholders. That is reflected again in the addendum, Chairperson, that is here on attached. Chair, I hand over to you. Thank you.
Mr. Gumete, just before I open the floor for questions from colleagues, could you just identify or two other issues that caused you to submit an addendum yesterday? One or two issues that you need to highlight causing the addendum to be changed, please. Thank you very much.
Chairperson, I guess if I may just talk to one or two issues. Well, the primary issue, Chairperson, has been, which is a concern raised by members, was how do we balance the interests of consumers and that of the utility, and in considering that, there are a number of issues, especially which relate to, I guess, if I were just to broadly categorize them, would be how do you deal? There was a question that was asked whether can we deal with the with RCAs that have been adjudicated by NERSA and are being liquidated, And that issue is dealt with again in the RFD. And I guess the answer is NESA cannot revisit its own decisions. So that was not something that could be done. Secondly, we do have this major issue around a court order which was issued in July of 2020, which had 6 paragraphs, and 5 of which were then appealed. But I guess the issue was that the actual decision itself was reviewed and set aside. The decision on NESA was reviewed and set aside. But that decision really that related to how NESA treated in 2019, how it treated the government grant, that the grant that was granted to Eskom over 3 years, those 23 billion rands over 3 years. And that decision, basically NESA's decision, was reviewed and set aside. And NESA basically was meant to then go back and basically reconsider its own decision. So that is a matter that it's still outstanding, that still needs to be finalized. But the issue was whether it to be finalized on time for the implementation in this financial year, and the resolution was that it is not going to be possible. Then, of course, the third category of matters are those matters like which, and I guess, Chair, it's been broadly reported on newspapers, the activities of the city of Joburg, Tshwane municipality in terms of collection of arrear debt. Eskom is not immune from this. In fact, perhaps one of the ones that is highly impacted by arrear debt. But the question was, to what extent would you then penalize the paying customers for those customers that are not paying, especially government departments? So the issue was that perhaps that the issue of collection of that arrear debt could be better done through other means rather than through a tariff. So, Chairperson, I'm hoping I have addressed your question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumede. I will now open the floor for questions. I suppose, colleagues, I'm going to suggest that we take questions in three. We take questions in 3 tranches, and along that way, we will able to make sure that all of us participate in this process. Obviously, we will repeat again should the questions be answered completely by Mr. Gumede and the team. I recognize Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Mr. Gumede. Chair, mine is really a question of clarity on the addendum based on what you had asked. I see that the numbers are quite different from the original submission to the addendum. And if I heard Mr. Gumede, he's saying this is accounted for by an adjustment relating to trying to balance the interests of the consumers. I wanted to check whether that is the only change that has been effected. One, but secondly, I see in the addendum that we have not accounted for the equity injection, which is contained in the original submission. So I also wanted clarity on that, Chair. Perhaps on those before we get into the substantive questions. Thank you, Chair.
Let me, given the fact that Mr. Sibanda, you started, if you have a third question, you can ask. Otherwise, I'll proceed to another member so that we can ask questions in tranches and Mr. Gumede can respond comprehensively. Please.
Chairperson, my questions are really based on the decision itself. So I first probably wanted clarity on the questions that I've asked, and then before I ask the other questions, because they flow from the response. Chair, if you don't mind.
Okay, no, thank you very much. In that case, then I would then revert back to Mr. Gumete. Those two questions, numbers have changed, but also the equity grant not being reflected in the addendum. If you could respond to those two, please, Mr. Gumete.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, I think just in respect of the addendum, the numbers have changed in terms of the addendum, and perhaps why they may even be reflected in the addendum. I'd like to indicate, Chair, that because we were presenting a report of the ELS of the committee, the electricity subcommittee, which had particular recommendations, some of which were actually there were particular requests that were made by the committee when it dealt with the original submission, and the team subsequently then took those and considered those comments and requests from the committee. But the feeling was that anything that did not come from the committee should then not be put forward as the report of the committee, but rather as an addendum, so that we actually separate out what was recommended by the committee from what subsequently emerged from the engagements that followed after the meeting of the committee. So basically, that was the main driver for the changes in the numbers. But the numbers themselves have changed significantly because of have changed significantly, I guess, because, you know, as we're saying, as the numbers were being refined, for instance, in terms of RAB, as the numbers in terms of the regulatory asset base were being refined, as well as other costs, particularly, for instance, what you would note, Chairperson, is that in the final numbers, or in the original numbers, we had a figure, for instance, of 5.6 billion rands in terms of arrear debt. That has been removed, and as indicated, that although it is a real cost to Eskom, that the feeling is that it needs to be dealt with directly rather than through a tariff. So there has been such adjustments that have been made subsequent to the ELS meeting, pursuant to the request by the members to go and try to refine and basically take into cognizance all of the current issues that are happening in the country, our economic recovery, the levels of unemployment, basically the impact of COVID. There is a lot that needed to be done to balance the interest, I guess, of Eskom with that of the consumers, and a lot of the numbers that then subsequently emerged were really as a result of that and the engagement with stakeholders that could have influence on any of the numbers that were outside of NERSA's purview. So I'm really hoping I've responded to that, Chair, properly. But the next question, which is the treatment of the equity injection as it is known, in terms of, as you recall, Chair, Eskom had been given 3 injections or grants by government of 23 billion. For each of the financial, for 3 years, for each of the financial years, 23 billion, which was dealt with in a particular manner by NERSA at that particular point at the beginning of MYPD4. That decision, in fact, was reviewed and set aside. But in terms of, because of the challenges that came with the judgment, at least from NERSA's point of view, where there was a feeling that there may have been the view that perhaps the judge may have gone into another sphere of government's area of focus, and by substituting NESA's decision with one of its own, and not just stopping there, but actually then pronouncing on the tariff, in our view, in contravention of Section 15(2) of the Electricity Regulation Act, was that matter was then taken on appeal. But the question was, if it's on appeal, should we have then done what NESA should have done in terms of then sitting down and reviewing that decision of its own decision, and not reviewing its own decision rather, but to reassess the application in respect of how it dealt with the grants. Now that process unfortunately had stalled. Largely, I guess, from depending on which side of the fence we are sitting, but the view is that we can't deal with that until there has been an outcome of the SCA appeal, and in respect of the other 5 paragraphs of that judgment. So, but we, in conversations, I guess, with the applicant, with the utility, the decision is that, in fact, what we should be doing is that, because NESA is actually appealing the issue of its powers of actually of determining determining a tariff, not so much the fact that perhaps in the manner in which those 23 billions were treated, maybe that's not what NESA is basically appealing. Therefore, we do need to actually sit down and actually work out a mechanism by which we can recoup those. I guess the outstanding amount now is 59 billion. In the manner in which the 59 billion can be recouped, but without negatively impacting on the economy too much. So that process is a process that will start immediately on completion of this particular process, but it won't be for implementation this year. It will have to be for implementation in the coming years. Again, I'm hoping that Chairperson, I have addressed that conclusively.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Gumate. Perhaps if there's a follow-up, Mr. Sibanda and colleagues, and any other question of fundamental nature relating to the addendum, so that we can ask questions from the substantive submission. Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm covered. Thank you, Mr. Gumede. Chair, perhaps for me, what we then need to probably do in terms of the decision, I think just to make it to flow better, if you look at decision 1, so for me, table 1 is not a separate decision, but flows from decision 1. And if you look at 3, it's still talking to decision 1. So perhaps what we need to do is to combine 1 and 3, and then have table 1 falling under those 2 paragraphs, because they're talking to the same thing. And then we'll probably then have I think it's 4, which then becomes decision 2. Yeah, and then the rest I think can flow from there. But Chair, regarding decision 11, and Chair, this was raised at the ELS, because I think when we considered the matter, it had been removed from the proposed decision, and then we recommended that it should be reinstated. But in reinstating it, we indicated that we should not just repeat what we had said before, because we've been saying this, or we've been restating this decision for the past 3 or so years, Chair. And I think what we had said is we need to indicate what has happened so far, and perhaps what needs to be done going forward. And the response that we got is that there are some funds that had been recovered, but that these will then be considered in the next RCA. So for me, I think that's perhaps what we should be stating under Decision 11, instead of just repeating what we've been saying for the past couple of years without indicating any progress on the matter. That's all from my side, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibanda. Mr. Gumede, can I ask in the meantime your team if they could try to effect what Mr. Sibanda has suggested in terms of the order? I'm not saying it's going to change, but so that you can perhaps flight it, well, not really flight it, but comment on it later on. Colleagues, other members, questions? Mr. Mkiza, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Thanks to Mr. Gumede and the team particularly for incorporating the comments that came through via the ELS, which I'm a member of, and also appreciate the issue of the exclusion of the area debt because it's more punitive on the paying customers who then bear the brunt of the failure of non-paying customers. And I think the issue of prudency reviews being done later on is incorporated. But I must also applaud the team for taking due cognizance of the availability factors, the issue of the plant availability, not compensating it as if it is a plant that is these plants are operating at their maximum capacity or what could be deemed as optimal capacity. So that is appreciated. What I didn't get clearly from my side is the issue of this capital injection, where we're looking at the equity injection. I mean, where we're looking at the 23 billion, whether we just reflect on it and if there are chances of that being liquidated over a period of years, or it would come up as something that should be done immediately. I just did not get that, whether we're just going to reflect on it as to what the increase is going to be if it were to be considered. Because I'm talking from the point of view of the customer out there being able to be informed, and also in the spirit of transparency and predictability. I think it is important that somehow the information does gets across to stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkiza. Any other questions, colleagues? Maybe for now, we'll come back, Mr. Gumede, for another round. Let me then hand over to you to respond, starting with the ordering, and then, of course, to issues around Decision 11 from Mr. Sibanda. Please, Mr. Gumede.
Thank you, Chairperson. And the team will actually accommodate all of the comments in terms of trying to improve the readability of the decision clearly. And thank Ms. Banda that now what we are for basically doing what I thought maybe I failed to communicate properly. In terms of decision, we're therefore wanting to replace the decision in the main document, but we are requesting that decision be replaced by the decision that is captured under that addendum 5.1. But in terms of the ordering, Chairperson, that will be done. I do hope that Chair, it's clear why we've got the two tables though, Table 1 and Table 2, because Table 1 deals with this particular application, which is the allowable revenue application, excluding RCAs and any other revenue that may have been determined before. And then Table 2 then basically expands on that by adding RCAs to then show what the impact will then ultimately be on the tariffs. I know we tend to reflect these the requested increases as well as a decision in terms of a percentage increase in tariff, but what is being applied for is a revenue application, which will then still need to then translate into a tariff, proper tariffs, which will then be considered in the second process of this tariff setting process, which is the ERSA process, which is going to be dealt with later. But we actually tend to reflect the numbers in terms of percentage tariff increase. But in fact, we should be reflecting, I guess, we should be reflecting an increase in the revenue based on the base year of last year. But nonetheless, those are the two tables, but the order, Chairperson, will then be considered. And then in respect of paragraph 11, in respect of decision 11, Chairperson, we did at ELS also indicate there is a section, albeit towards the end of the RFD, that deals extensively with some of the cases that have been concluded, and some of the amounts that had already been paid back by the would-be offenders, and some of those monies have been dealt with in previous RCAs. We did indicate that, but clearly, going forward, as Mr. Sibanda is indicated, we actually need to be a bit more explicit. But there have been some of the monies that have been recovered. Those monies have been applied, have been included in the previous RCA applications. Those that have at least been conclusively finalized. But clearly, there's going to be a bit more emerging from specifically from the Zondo Commission. But Chair, we actually take the enhancement which is proposed by Mr. Sibanda into consideration as we finalize the RFD. Thanks. In respect of the question, again, Mr. Mkhize, on behalf of the team, I really also like to thank you for acknowledging the good work that the team has done and the more work that still needs to be done in terms of prudency and also to effect some of the issues that may emerge from specifically the Zondo Commission and any other investigation that is ongoing. But what is still not, maybe I didn't clarify it properly, Mr. Mkhize, in terms of the equity injection. What we're saying is that, and this was in essence, I guess, part of the issue that was raised, the concern that was raised by NERSA in terms of the decision that was the High Court decision of the 30th of November 2020, which not only reviewed and set aside the manner in which NERSA had treated the equity injection, but which went further than that and substituted. And in the substitution, it merely looked at it as if we just take the 23 billion and just add them back. That you add a 23 billion each year back onto the revenue that may have been predetermined, without considering any other impacts that it may have, and maybe even impacts on the numbers that are presented themselves. So in essence, going forward, for the purposes of transparency, Mr. Mkhize, the hope is that the NERSA team and ESCOM team will get together and work out a mechanism that will again seek to balance the interest of Eskom and as well as that of consumers, to look at a program over a number of years, which will allow for the recoupment of those amounts that may have been handled inappropriately. Now, in considering that, clearly, one would actually have to look also, like for instance, this year, I mean, the issue here was to what extent can you just put in 23 billion and then the actual resultant tariff increase would be, in the middle of, would be above 20%, for instance. To what extent can the economy bear that? Number one. Therefore, I think in just being a responsible corporate citizen as well, Eskom has also in its own consideration said yes, they will not they need their money back. That was their shareholder money that was given to them, but they will be prepared to actually work out a plan that will allow for the recoupment of those monies over a period of time to minimize the impact on the economy. I'm hoping that I've done a better job, Chain, in explaining this equity injection. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumede. May I just try to not really paraphrase what Mr. Mkhize seeks to be saying? Is that given the equity grant or injection, as it were, I think we need to somehow reflect it, that something that is not died, that's something that will be dealt with later. Well, however later it can be paraphrased without making a firm decision, so that whoever reads our resolution, perhaps it does indicate that it's still alive. If I may put it that way, Mr. Gumede.
Noted, Chairperson. I think, yes, if it's not reflected properly in the RFD, Chairperson, we will definitely do that, because the amounts are not lost. They are going to be recouped, but they're going to be recouped responsibly. I saw Mr. Sichotlo's hand up, Chair. If you're
welcome to identify him, Mr. Gumede.
If we can allow him to actually, Mrs. Sichotlo, do you want to add something?
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, Chair. It was nothing much to add on what Mr. Gumede had said, but just to alert members that once that plan has been drafted as to how we do that, we'll possibly then have to go back to court to get that to be a court order, because we're sitting with a court order that says this money must be done with immediate effect, the 23 billion. I don't know, Mr. Gumede, if that's that is fine with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chota, for clarifying that bit. That says we have to remember that this is an outcome of so there is a court order, and NERSA on its own, neither NERSA nor Eskom can on their own decide not to implement the order. However, the issue was to the extent to which the order is being appealed. But I guess the issue is, do we then have to wait until the appeal, or can the two parties sit together and actually have a particular position which they can then jointly take to the courts and then get a new court order, which would be the one that emanates from the two parties. Yes, thanks for that addition and clarification, Mr. Sichota.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose that will then be reflected in a statement as part of the decision. Any contribution, colleagues? Can I count 1, to Ms. Masetti. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I recall during our deliberations at the ELS and the extended ALS that we, as we monitor the performance of the utility, it is important when we make decisions of this nature, which are forward-looking, that we do spell out improvements in performance, what we expect when the utility comes back again and ask for money to be able to do what it is expected to do. So I take it that this is an opportunity for us to be able to state clearly what is it that from our own evaluation of the previous applications, RCAs, which were backward looking, as well as the revenue applications, including this one, having seen how the EAF has dropped, and the fact that they have to bring in the OCGTs to compensate for unavailability of the coal fleet. What is it that we are saying that this utility should focus on in terms of improving performance and set performance targets for the utility, and expect that when it comes back again and ask for revenue, that it will then account for the performance targets that we have set for this utility. I haven't heard the team talking to that, Chairperson, and it's something that will be done by any regulator around the world. This is just something that I wanted to bring up, Chairperson, again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Masetti. Any other further questions, colleague, before I revert back for the last time to Mr. Gumede? Any further questions? Mr. Gumede, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. On this one, I'd request detailed assistance from the team. However, just to indicate from the engagement with the team on this one is that clearly, again, following the prescripts of the MYPD4 methodology, which, for instance, it prescribes the manner in which assets will be recognized. That more than that, and it looks at it in terms of replacement costs. I like to believe that the team can further clarify on this, that the team in this particular case has done, I think, a good job to then say, because we are looking at replacement with a modern equivalent plant, a modern equivalent plant would be available for this amount, allowing for X percentage of time for maintenance, and it will also be able to perform at a particular level. And therefore, when we then look at the depreciated asset value of that particular plant, it will take into account the efficient operations of those plants. The numbers that are presented are not necessarily numbers that somebody would say, but my plant, because of whatever problems, only has got a plant availability of 20%. But what we're saying is that as long as that plant is then revalued as a modern equivalent plant, it is assumed that it will have an energy availability factor of 85%, for instance. That is so for, yes, you get one value because of the replacement value, but then, of course, you then assume that you're going to be performing. We are also performing at the rating of that modern equivalent. That then resulted in the adjustments that the team made. But Chairperson, if you allow me, I'd really like to get to request Mr. Sechotlo and his team, Thabo in particular, perhaps to add anything in terms of what I may have said to address this very important issue that's been raised, I think, a number of times at the subcommittee, specifically by Madam Seti, and again raised today. Mr. Sichotlose and your team, if you can add.
Thanks, Mr. Gumede. I think you've got it. For us having made that adjustment from a lower EAF to an expected or benchmark EAF that is based on modern equivalent, that in itself is saying that we expect you, ESCOM, to perform at a benchmark EAF of 85% and not the lower EAF that you are presenting to us. That adjustment in itself is a message to say that should you, and if for instance, then ESCOM in going forward, for some good reason, they then improve their EAF, obviously they will get the benefits of that. But if it gets even worse than where it is now, they will be punished for that. So the expected EAF that we are talking about is an 85% EAF and nothing less. If they then beat what they are currently having, an adjustment maybe to their benefit. So that in itself is a message that we are sending, or expected performance level that we are saying, ESCOM, we are allowing you to value our asset based on modern equivalent value. So if we say that, then we are going to then expect you to perform at modern equivalent value performance. That is what it's saying. But maybe, Chair, maybe what we may need to do is in our RFD to come out clear and say it. Maybe it's not as clear as Ms. Maseti may want to see it, but that in itself is trying to say that. Thanks. And it's not only that. I think even under the maintenance, we do state certain expected level of maintenance and making sure that plants are brought in at the right time after they went on maintenance. So we do set those, and maybe what we can have is just maybe somewhere in the RFD, just some paragraphs that are saying these are expected performances or performance standards from ESCOM, and we list them to be clear, just to be summarized in one part of the RFD. I think that may cover the member then, Chairperson. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chotlo. I think, as indicated, Chair, we will then enhance the RFD to better reflect exactly what we mean by the analysis that has been done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gumede and Mr. Chotlo. Mr. Mkhize.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do appreciate the responses provided and the refinement in terms of the RFD. But I think that we should not lose sight of the fact that a lot of work then goes in between applications. And therefore, I would maybe request the team to consider an equivalent for example, the system quality incentive, something along those lines, now dealing with plant performance, which then is expressed in terms of the energy availability factor. So if you can, in looking at that, to be more precise and specific, I think that would help. The same would go with maintenance, because then it will make the process of even assessing whether it's this application as the MYPD or an RSCA much more streamlined. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkhize. I thought your contribution was more of an enhancement, unless if Mr. Gumede would like to respond to that. I thought it's an enhancement.
Chairperson, we are correct. Thanks. We'll consider accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much, colleagues. I think we would now have to move to the recommendations. I think there were two suggestions that perhaps may affect the order of the recommendations, which we'll go through now. I think the first one had to do with the ordering of the tables. And then the second one is purely just to add a paragraph that will indicate how the 23 billion grant is going to be dealt with. Not really dealt with, but it is there and it will still be finalized at some stage. I think we need a paragraph in that regard. So with that, colleagues, just reading from where I'm sitting, in addition of that maybe it will be paragraph 12, because the last paragraph, it's 11. I'm just going to identify the objections or any other comment in terms of the draft decision. The first decision has to do with the table that refers to table 1 regarding the allowable revenue requested, including the RCAs, and then the table on 2, then the table on 3, and then paragraph 4 deals with the decision inclusive of the RCAs, and perhaps that's the one that was suggested that it must be placed up front. And then there's paragraph 5 that also identify the element in detail, referring to paragraph 3. And then paragraph 6 it really has to do with the retail tariff structure that is expected to be submitted later. And then paragraph 7, equally the same, relating to I think paragraph 6 has to do as to where the revenues come from, and of course, that will be reflected in ERSA. And then paragraph 7 is really giving an instruction, a request that it will be submitted later by the applicant. And then paragraph 8 has to do with further work which is subject to some processes such as prudence review, efficiency test, and performance thresholds. And then paragraph 9 has to do with, if there's a need, there will also be the valuation of a regulatory asset base. Paragraph 12 relates to the question of the regulator taking it upon itself to audit the generate fleet performance. And finally is the one that deals with the certain governance failures that may have occurred in ESCOM. And then, of course, the 12th one, I think, if there's somebody who can coin that one whilst we are in the meeting, we can do that. However, colleagues, those are the recommendations. Mr. Gumete, let me leave that just to confirm. How do you want to do the 2 additions that have just been made? Mr. Sibanda?
Apologies, Chair. Chairperson, I just wanted to clarify the recommendation that I suggested. So what I was saying is that decision 1 remains as is. However, it should be combined with the narrative under decision 3, because they both talk to table 1, which is the allowable revenue excluding the RC. And then the current 4 becomes decision 2, because now it talks about the decision inclusive of the RCAs, and then the rest will follow. I hope that makes sense, Chair. Thanks.
I think I understand it now, but let me leave it to Mr. Gumede.
Chairperson, thanks. I'd like to thank Mrs. Wanda for clarifying what you were saying, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But and also, Chair, your request for us dealing with decision 12, which will deal with the issue of the 23 billion. Chair, but can I request that we don't try to do it on this platform? That we have the team has had the instruction in terms of. And we are all, I think, as members, aware in terms of what we are of the decisions. But we'll then rely on management with the assistance from RSU, of course, in terms of capturing succinctly what members have said, to then properly craft this and then incorporate, for instance, this addendum now into the into the RFD, and then of course they may have to then readjust the RFD accordingly. So, but rather than try to actually craft it here, Chair, if we can note that decision 12, note the comments that have been raised by Mr. Spanda, which are very valid. So it becomes decision 1 and decision the actual tables that relate to decision 1, and also table the other decision 2, and the narrative that talks to that. The team will then readjust the tables accordingly. But Chair, if I may request that we don't try to do it here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumede. I suppose we will one will accede to that, given the fact that all members understand the elements relating to that equity injection. So I fully agree with Mr. Gumede that can be crafted outside the meeting, and it will be part of resolution 12. With those 12 resolutions, colleague, can we indicate by a show of hands whether we support the recommendation, which is contained in pages 2, 3, and 4 of the addenda? By show of hands, Spongose, Mr. Gumede, Ms. Mpongose, Ms. Maseti. That means is everybody, colleagues, Mr. Smana, and everyone, including myself. So, colleagues, there is a unanimous decision on the recommendations, with minor changes on the recommendations made by the Electricity Subcommittee. Congratulations, Mr. Gumede. If there's anything to say before we move on to the next agenda item.
Chairperson, I'd just like to thank you in particular for all of the guidance throughout this process. It's been a very long process. To thank the members for all their input, especially I guess the other members are all members of the subcommittee, for all of the good work done since the passing of the judgment on the 3rd of December, and the speed at which the consultation paper was dealt with, and also the process of consulting the public, and to thank the public also for the input. And we would like to hope that the public will see the value and of their input, and that we've tried to incorporate everybody's input, comments into this decision. So, Chairperson, just like to thank on behalf of the team, like to thank everybody, the members, the stakeholders, but also just to thank the team for the hard work done. Thank you, Chairperson. Oh, and also to thank the applicant for cooperating with the regulator throughout the process, including the public hearing, and even in terms of the process of concluding this final RFD. Thank you, Chair.
Just to add, Mr. Gumede, the policymakers, they've managed to meet with us, COCTA, DPE, and the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. Maybe you would have wanted to say that again.
Yes, Chair. I guess in terms of our consultation, without Chair, maybe because I would like to also just to stress that we have engaged with and there's been a lot of consultation with the policymakers, the shareholder department, but of course the decision of NERSA is actually is not influenced in any way by any of those engagements by shareholders or by policymaker, except on matters that were policy related, which fell completely outside of NERSA's purview. But we'd like to thank them as well, Chair, for accommodating us and actually rearranging their diaries, and their busy schedules to actually hear our case and also to guide where they could. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumede, for that clarification. It's very, very, very important, the last points that you have made. We would then, colleagues, if you agree, then move on to the next item of the agenda, which is item 6, which is Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee Chairperson. We will deal with item 6.1, titled Transnet Tariff Application for its petroleum pipeline system for the 2022-2023 financial year. Let me hand over to Mr. Mkhize. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I would like also to thank all the members up front for the engagements that you have had thus far, really starting in earnest from the time we're looking at the pre-meeting for the public hearing, where inputs were put forth and the team duly incorporated those comments. That is also highly appreciated of the team to incorporate them. I would also like to highlight also that in this one, normally Transnet submits their application on the 1st of August of each year, but because of the challenges that they faced, they then asked for a 30-day postponement in terms of launching the application, which was then done on the 1st of September. So we've worked in a tighter schedule than normal. But back to the submission as it stands, is that we hereby request the regulator to set tariffs for the Transnet pipeline system from April 2022 to the 31st of March 2023, to approve also the implementation of 80% of the determined allowable revenue of 7.5 billion, which equates to 6 billion. That number there, we have also done a refinement of the numbers. So members, if you can just be understanding in that regard, for example, we've got 6 billion.08. It should be 6,004.08 million. But there's just the refinement of the figures there for the Transnet pipeline system, and the deferral of the 20%, which is about 1.5 billion, but over a period not exceeding 5 years. And then to approve the decision and reason for decision document that has been put forth. So I'd just like to highlight just the issues of challenges that were faced, which I think all the members, I take this document as read. All the members are quite or fair thereon, because it's the issue of lower volumes, as we understand, coming from the COVID-19 hard lockdowns, the higher operating expenditures, mainly due to the cleanup cost of as a result of product thefts on the Transnet pipeline system, as well as the deferred allowable revenue in the 2019-20 decision. So that was the main causes for the higher tariff. The issues that were raised are actually contained in the submission on page 14, where there's the issues of the analysis of the comments of stakeholders and incorporating those comments, which the team has since done, as well as to look at the issues of volumes. The volumes were actually adjusted after the application was submitted, due to the process of consultations with stakeholders who viewed the volumes put forth as pessimistic. And therefore, we ended up with a volume of about 14.7 billion liters per annum that was then included. As I said, Chairperson, that there have been several discussions in this regard. We had a workshop, and the increase that now is going to be felt at the end of the day in the tariff from Durban to Arrowed. We're looking at about 8.02% increase. I will leave it at that, Chairperson, and take questions with the assistance of the team composed of Madam Mtwa, Madam Bogo, and Mr. Kaba. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkhize. What I forgot to do to Mr. Gumede and do it to you now, I really want to thank you, colleagues, for your workshops and your extended meetings. They do facilitate some discussions. Thank you very much. Let me then open the floor for members to raise questions. I think we had a workshop on this one, we had a meeting, and then it's now here for decision, colleagues. Any questions to raise? Maybe just to break the ice, I would congratulate you, Mr. Mkhize, that at least you have acceded to the request to aid table. I think it's table 1 on page 6 of 91. Save the fact that it would have been nicer if it looks like page 5 of 17, but it's fine like that. I mean, one would have wanted to see what was applied for and what is necessary approval, because on that table it doesn't show what the applicant applied for and what is our approval. And of course, there is that paragraph. On paragraph 1, there's that last sentence. It looks like it's hanging, Mr. Mkhize. If you want to have a look at it, it talks about a percentage on table 1. I'm not sure whether there is a percentage there. Maybe I'm wrong. And then on paragraph 5, I think if we could give a full name of the MPP, and that would be the contribution I make in terms of the corrections. Other than that, colleagues, any further questions to raise to Mr. Mkhize? I think we're going for 1, we're going for 2, we're going for 3, then it's gone. Then in that particular case, Mr. Mkhize, I don't know whether the comments that I've made are worth responding to, Mr. Mkhize?
No, I just want to first of all, again, thank the team, the members, and also to state that just for the record, state that the application was actually 60 days late. It was submitted on the 30th of September, not the 1st, just to correct that one. Hence the pressure that we had to work under. And I, again, appreciating the members acceding to short notices for meetings and workshops so that we can be able to deal with this matter. The issue that you have raised concerning the table, I take them as enhancement. Will then include the application figures and also have the at first mention MPP being written in full. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mkhize. Colleagues, we then move on to the recommendation, just to repeat them so that they're read into the record. The decision that is proposed, it's on page 6 of 91. The first one is the one that deals with table 1, explaining the table 1, and then paragraph 2, that also just indicate the approval that has been made, subject to the truncation that is imposed by 80%. And then we move on to paragraph 3 that deals with smoothing. And then paragraph 4 that deals with various tariffs of particular lines. Paragraph 4 deals with the MPP that has to be either reviewed or something of that nature, verification. Paragraph 6 deals with any assessment, any asset that has been included for the purposes of determining the tariff, and of course depreciation, operating and maintenance in paragraph 7. And on paragraph 5, it deals with the clawback issue, how it should be seen going forward, and the issue of overcosts on paragraph 9. And then paragraph 10 also deals with the matter of subject that there will be some verification, audit, and investigations. And then paragraph 11 deals with the other matters that are more of financial nature, issues of debt, cost allocation, and so on. And then paragraph 12, which indicates when the next application will be. If there are any amendments, Mr. Mkhize, if there are none, then I think we would then go straight to request members to show their support by raising hands. Ms. Maseti, Mr. Swandam, Ms. Mbungose, Ms. Tole, Ms. Mkhize, and everybody else, Mr. Kumete, including myself. Thank you very much, colleagues. And this is also a unanimous decision approving this decision for this particular report of Mr. Mkhize. Colleagues, we have come to the end of the deliberations. I think it's very fair to indicate to members that between management and some regulator members, particularly the chairpersons of committees, there's a lot of administrative work that we need to perform today, and that will also be done. And also to indicate that the communications department of NERSA has organized a press briefing or a media briefing taking place at 2:00. Other than that, colleagues, may I propose that the meeting stands adjourned? Companies.
Yes. Members.
Sorry, can you, I didn't hear that.
No, sir, thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much. The meeting stands adjourned, colleagues. The time is 10:24. I really want to thank you on behalf of the two colleagues who presented, and thank you for your attendance and also your sacrifice for tomorrow. Thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson and colleagues.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.